On behalf of the Humanity Project, want to say thank you for the opportunity to engage in a discussion with our school resource officers here in the Fond du Lac School District that I don't think is had in many school districts across the country. So really appreciate the opportunity that you are bringing for our community to really see more about what you do and what you hope to accomplish as school resource officers.
In terms of what my biggest learning, the biggest thing I've learned in my role so far, I would say that it's been uh, learning to problem solve through validation, empathy, and also clear communication, and getting a buy-in. So what I mean by that is, if I have personally gone through numerous situations where I've gone in and dealt with situations from, let's say, something as small as parking, student issue, a parental complaint. And if I don't understand what the problem is or what the complaint is actually rooted in, I can come up with a solution that doesn't really make the individual who is complaining feel as though they have been validated. So without that validation or that buy-in from them, I still have not technically fixed what the actual issue is because I'm just trying to knock it out. So what I try to do whenever I'm dealing with these situations is I'll sit down and try and have an empathetic ear. I'll communicate and talk to them. What is going on? And if it feels as though there's something underneath, perhaps I'll go and go in deeper there. From there, I'll validate how they're feeling by getting a buy-in from them, allowing them to have the opportunity to have an input into my solution or what I'm going to be doing. Because again, if I go through and I decide what I'm going to do in that situation and take care of the problem based on what I want, I could do 15 different things. However, that individual will not feel that they had an input, and so now it has not been completed or taken care of the way they want it, and now they don't feel validated. So I typically will talk to them, find out what is going on with them, lend that empathetic ear, and give them the opportunity to give some input and have them involved with finding a solution. And from there, I found that even if I went and did 50 different things, took care of a lot of paperwork, I will get done and still not be done because now I'm still fielding more calls from this person who is upset. Where if I involved them, had that empathetic ear, validated them, and allowed them to have that buy in, I could do far less and they will still feel as though the problem was taken care of. And that's what truly matters one way or another. They're the ones who are complaining, understanding what they want, and then doing that as opposed to just doing what I think needs to be taken care of. That was a huge learning point, but it has helped me and working through situations and also truly eradicating a lot of problems by communicating and problem solving through validation and empathy.
I guess for me, just starting out here in the high school, I'm starting to see that uh, stuff that matters to these kids, they're very emotional about it. And it never occurred to me, I mean, being a adult in law enforcement for that many years and dealing with a lot of big issues and concerning things, uh, that these kids don't realize that some of the stuff that they're dealing with is very minute, and but they get extremely emotional about it. Uh, like someone will say something bad online about them or something. Well, then it's like the end of the world for them, and they're very emotional about it. And so I'm starting to learn more that it's a big deal to them at this time, and uh, I just have to step in and let them know that uh, there's a lot more to life and that people are going to not like you throughout life or uh, say mean things about you. So uh, that's one of my learning things is the high emotion that some of these students have here.
As far as challenges, when all of us have gotten into our school resource officer role, we were first in patrol. And there's policies and procedures and how we handle things, and we do them the way we feel that we're doing a good job from what the police department wants. Well, now when you come into the school, you have that piece of it still, but then you also have how the school district wants to do things and how they expect things to be handled in their school environment. And then, so, excuse me, there's that balance between police and the school district and finding out where that balance is. For me, that was something that took a little bit of time just to kind of gather information and learn from different experiences. So now that I'm in my third school year, I feel like I got a good handle on what the expectations are. Now I've got previous experiences to be able to draw from, so that way when things do occur during the school day, I'm able to handle it where both entities are feeling that the situation has been handled appropriately, as well as the people that are directly impacted by that.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up, because I think it is important. I don't know how many people do realize too that our school resource officer program really is a partnership between the district and the police department. So it's not just, I mean, one or the other. It's really like, how do we meld two completely different organizations who handled things with different, whether it be the policies and the procedures as you're talking about, where we talk about just even the threshold in meeting definitions. Officer Tuttle, you talked about like bullying or something where you're talking about bullying and harassment may have two completely different definitions, and yet you're involved both representing the school district and representing the police department. And so when they're different, how do you work together when you're both, trying to address, especially with school administration, the same incident, but as you're approaching it from different lenses. So that does certainly, so I'm glad you brought that up.
For me, I feel like anytime I have contact with, whether it's a student, staff, administrator, citizen in the community, people from the police department, I want people to feel like they've had someone who actually listens to them, cares about what it is that they're going through, kind of tying into Officer Brown's piece about empathy, understanding what it is that they're going through and taking that into account. I think a lot of people just want to be listened to. They want to be heard. And for a lot of people, that actually helps them to de-escalate and be able to make rational decisions again. Having meaningful contacts with students in particular, because that's where most of our activity is centered around, is really important to me. And one that in particular that I can recall is when I got here, he was in sixth grade. He was a sixth grade student, and we were in the cafeteria, and I had only been here like a month or two, and I didn't know anybody. And I was walking around the cafeteria, and he's like, "I hate cops." And I was like, "Wow!" I didn't even say anything to him. I was just walking around. And so what I did was I made it a point, not necessarily in that moment, but gradually over time, to make contact with him on a regular basis, whether it's just a hi, what do you got? What are you eating today? Or, what are you watching? Or, whatever it was. And gradually over time, I kind of broke down that barrier where now that he's in eighth grade, he actually will go out of his way to like say something to me or say hi to me. And one day I was like, "Do you remember when you were in sixth grade?" And I was walking by, and he was like, "I hate cops." And he's like, "Yeah, I do remember that." And he's like, "Well, because both of my parents were arrested when I was younger, and so I had a negative impression about police." And now I think that having that contact with me, his police officer in his school, he's understood, or he's learned that all police aren't bad. Was more the situation that was occurring, that he had that interaction, his parents had that interaction with law enforcement. So, having those meaningful contacts, and changing some perception, it's something that, I hope that anybody that comes in contact with me takes away from that experience with me.
Yeah, thank you for that. I appreciate that. Tying it back to, what Officer Brown said about, the empathy and the validation of, not knowing what happened up until that contact that you had at that moment. So whatever, the student saying that to you, not having that, you don't know what happened. So rather than reacting to what they said, kind of approaching it another way and in changing the insight or the influence perspective that people have.
Yeah, Jesse's absolutely right in the relationship building part. I think a big misconception that we hear a lot of times from individuals about officers being in the schools, the school resource officers, is that they're concerned because cops in the schools mean more kids arrested, more kids cited, more kids getting in trouble, and we're there just to enforce the laws and bust kids, which is a huge misconception. Our purpose is to build relationships. That's our number one goal when we come into the schools, is to build those relationships. And a big way to do that is to go around and talk to your schools. So for example, I'll do visits with my elementary schools regularly, build those relationships, get to know them, do classroom visits where I talk about like my equipment and what being a police officer is about. And we talk about different safety topics. I do presentations in the middle schools where we talk about like internet safety and why drugs are unsafe and vaping is unsafe and that kind of those types of things. But also the critical presentations that I feel are phenomenal that we do here at Tyson is at the beginning of the school year within the first month. And then in January/February, as a reminder, we pull all the kids in to the auditorium during their Tiger Times. And we go over the whys they can't do things, because that's a huge thing for kids. Just like us as adults want to know why we have to do things a certain way, they deserve to know why our expectations are what they are as well. So we explain to them why it's important not to do certain things on social media that can get them into trouble, and explain to them those laws. We explain to them why they can't loiter or be truant at school, because explaining to those laws, what can happen as a result of that. We sit down and we explain all that to them up front, along with our expectations, just to help mitigate issues throughout the school year. Do we still occasionally have issues? Yes, obviously, because they're teenagers, right? But it minimizes it. And we see a reduction when we do those conversations and explain that to them. And that's all part of building the relationships, is we're putting it up front and we're talking to them.
For me, if I'm looking at in terms of promoting, it's not necessarily that any officer will want to go in promoting the school to prison pipeline. However, I do understand the theory and where they're getting the statistics from in that sense, where having officers in schools, and in this case, more students of color are disproportionately disciplined and sanctioned and even arrested. What I can say to that is I can only speak for myself and here in terms of what I have seen. And I know that subconscious bias can lead us to focus on some more than others. So I can speak to myself. I know that when I was at the high school, and I was very, very keen on ensuring that I worked on loitering and holding kids accountable for loitering, because what I saw was that a lot of issues, fights, and other things that were happening when kids were loitering or skipping class and not where they were supposed to be. If I have them in class and hold them accountable for being in class, then they would hopefully stay out of trouble and not end up either getting themselves harmed or harming someone else, or missing out on their valuable education. So with unconscious bias and not understanding it, I noticed for myself, and I'm speaking for myself, that At one point, early on in my career as being a school resource officer, numerous kids in the hallway. However, there's a lot of attention that was being placed on kids of color. I noticed that. Now, when you look at it on paper, yes, it was kids of color. What I noticed was that it wasn't that it was kids of color that was drawing my attention. It was loud, boisterous behavior that was drawing my attention. So while I was focused on the loud laughing, the joking, the play fighting that these individuals were doing, I noticed that I'm going over there to deal with that, and there's other students who are probably walking by me, quiet, who are technically doing the same thing. They're not joking and laughing and being boisterous in the hallway, but they are still skipping class. If I looked at the stats, they're skipping class just as well. So how do I fix that? One, I need to understand what's going on there. I need to figure out a solution and understand that there's some type of unconscious bias that's happening. And then I need to make sure that I'm not buying into that. So I looked at the fact that what I need to do is any and everyone that I see, whether they're laughing or walking or quiet, if they're in the hallway, I need to address them no matter what. And that is what will tell me whether or not I'm finding someone or who's late. In this case over here at Woodworth right now, we get every single kid back to class, and then we check the attendance. The attendance is going to say who was or was not there. It takes away that unconscious bias that might be there that I may not even know that is happening. Again, a lot of times I know for myself, I get told when I'm with my brothers and sisters that we're too loud. We're not too loud. I just know that my brother's talking and making a joke, and I thought it was funny, so I'm talking very loud and I'm laughing very loud, and that's how we communicate. That can draw attention. So understanding those biases, understanding that there is the theory out there of school to prison pipeline, ensuring that you're not you're not contributing to that negativity there as a school resource officer by being ignorant of the fact that it's out there. I think those are going to be ways that we're going to ensure that we are not promoting that we're actually being part of a solution. And I also feel that being a school resource officer focus on ensuring the safety of the students and ensuring that they are being held accountable. Not that they're being held accountable, but there is consistent accountability for breaking laws, breaking rules, is going to show them that they need to that we need to adhere to these laws and rules, because right now they're students, they're kids. If they continue with that same negative behavior, once they become adults, hopefully I'm teaching them that they need to adjust their behavior, because otherwise there will be real consequences that will lead them to prison. I've seen that here, holding kids accountable and showing that there is accountability for certain things has actually drastically brought down the amount of fights that we've had, drastically brought down the amount of loitering that we've had. But again, that's with that understanding that the why of what I'm doing and being conscious of that.
Yeah, just a quick point. I would say that, there is that mindset in people's mind that, law enforcement in schools is pro law enforcement or enforcing of laws, whether it's arrest or citations or whatnot. And I would say that the majority of my time in schools is spent trying to avoid at all costs law enforcement consequences. We always try to do the least amount first, whether it's, a lunch detention or after school detention, school consequences of some sort. And in addition to that, explaining the why, having those discussions in a way that's informative, educational, kind of like a counseling piece, if you will, where they're learning and they're growing, so that way they don't make those same mistakes in the future. And a lot of times, especially at the middle school and elementary school level, because they're so young, they're going to make mistakes. And talking to them about that, explaining the why, the consequences, the unintended consequences of their actions even, helps them make a conscious decision not to do it again. And then we avoid having to have a law enforcement consequence down the road. So, for me as a school resource officer, I literally go out of my way at all possible to avoid law enforcement consequences. Does that mean that I don't do any? No, not, you know, there are people that didn't learn from their initial consequence, so then they have to have another consequence on top of that or in addition to it in the future, so that way they change their behavior, because really that's the goal. We want to change whatever behavior that we're seeing that is not safe or healthy or productive to an educational setting.
So I wanted to add one other piece to that, and that's the explaining the why to the kids. So oftentimes when there is a smaller consequence, the initial that we do is, like you said before, is that we're trying to look for consequences that don't fall in line with law enforcement consequences. So I typically do try to talk to the students and say, hey, the reason I'm doing this is because we are looking for change behavior from you. So when I come and talk to you and speak to you nicely and say, hey, we appreciate it if you don't do that, that's where I need you to listen, because if we continue to escalate to a certain point, now you're going to force us to have some other serious consequences. And we've intervened in school consequences, counseling, and everything else prior to that. So when you're getting those lesser consequences, we want change behavior, because that's what we're looking for there. We want to make sure that we're talking to you, that we're working with you. And part of for the city of Fond du Lac Police Department and our school resource officers, one of the main, I will say, in our memorandum of understanding for us being school resource officers and our intervention with the students, it is building professional relationships. That's what our main goal is here. We want to keep the school safe and build professional and positive relationships with the students. Those are our main focuses here. So it isn't necessarily taking kids to prison. It is not, definitely not charging students or whatever else. We understand the financial burden that it gives to the students and even their families. And our ultimate goal is to find that positive, have that be that stopping block so that they do not continue to escalate, and we get those change behaviors so that we're not having to deal with them once they're 18 and they end up with very serious charges. That's something we definitely don't want.
I'll go down around to my elementary schools. I'll interact with the kids, go into the classrooms and do lessons on safety, and go through the police equipment, because that's always the cool attention getter for the younger kids. They like to learn about the stuff that we wear on our uniforms. I've even brought my police car and done tours of my squad car, and other fun equipment in. But just being there, even for like their big events that they have, their Halloween costume marches, and other events that they have, and participating with them and playing with them. On the middle school level, it's about being present when the kids are out in the hallways, talking to them, interacting with them. You know, kind of along the lines with the Officer Pimentel, when I first came here, there was a group of kids that had no issues being vocal about not having any desire to be around police or did not care for police. You know, and a lot of those kids now, they'll give me high fives or hugs in the hallways and come see me. And I have my candy jar that I have my daily visitors throughout the day come get some candy from me, and just don't tell the nurse. But no, it's about being out there, being present, building positive relationships, and not just being there during the school day, but like appearing at the dances. So I'll come and work the dances and interact with the kids when they're having fun and they're doing assembly events, you know, and then the 8th grade events that they have, and just getting those positive relationships out there. But it's also important to me. And one of the things I make sure to do is, if I do have to issue a consequence to a kid or counsel them for something, that I give them that breathing room of that day. And then the next day, immediately go right back into building that positive relationship with them, asking them how their day was, their weekend was, how things are going, noticing when maybe their demeanor is off a little bit, asking them if they're okay, and just rebuilding that rapport with them right away and helping them understand that, look, you made a mistake. You ended up with a consequence as a result of your mistake. It's done. now we move forward, no grudges, got no issues with you. You're a good kid in general, but everybody makes mistakes, even adults do. And I tell the kids that all the time. You know what? Adults make mistakes too. I'm a police officer. I make mistakes. I don't know any police officers that don't make a mistake once in a while, but we all suffer the consequence of our decisions and our mistakes. And then we have to move forward from that.
Yeah, thank you for that. Officer Tuttle, as a new school resource officer, just brand spanking new 3 months on, do you want to talk about how you've been able to engage in building relationships?
Sure. Well, obviously the high school is huge. So getting to know these kids, and Officer Brown talked a little bit as well. Like you pass these kids in the hallway, and I won't even I've never seen this kid before, but I've been here for 3 months. So some of them just stay under the radar, and Officer Brown's correct. They might be skipping. We have 3 different lunch hours here, and sometimes the lunchroom, they're like, yep, this kid's not supposed to be here. Well, that's because they know that kid, and he is now known because he's got in other trouble. There's other kids that they could possibly be out there for every lunch hour, and then they just blend in. So for me, yeah, getting to know the kids is important. As far as consequences for these kids, once I deal with them, I always tell them once we're done, I said, all right, well, now this is what's going to happen. But as far as our relationship, it's tomorrow we say hi in the hallway, just like a normal conversation. And they're pretty receptive to that. And I haven't had any issues.
Well, thank you all for your time today. We are out of time, so really appreciate that. Just as we wrap up here, are there any last thoughts that you want to share with our Humanity Project participants, just in regards to your role as school resource officers, or anything else that we've talked about? Just, I guess, open up the floor if there's any last comments you want to say before we end. Officer Brown.
I'll take the time and just say thank you all for the work that you've put in. I have been able to benefit from learning about a lot of different things, inclusive, like I said before, subconscious or unconscious biases that even I may have, and understanding those things and learning about understanding those types of things has helped me to ensure that I'm able to build better relationships and genuine relationships and not fall into those holes there. For me, I'm appreciative of the work that you guys put in and the reach that you guys have had at this point. And I appreciate you allowing us to come in here to have these conversations as well.